Companies don't follow laws unless the laws are enforced. Right now, a lot of factory farms and companies in the meat industry think that they're above the law, and that's because they've gotten away without being prosecuted for a lot of their crimes. When I was 11, my parents bought me a bird named Conrad as a present. He was a cockatiel, and I loved him so much. He changed my life. Before I got him, I just thought of birds as more like an object. And then when I met him, I found out, first of all, that they're warm. That was the first thing I noticed. And then that they have opinions and they want things and they get upset if they don't have what they want. And they get really excited and sing if they have what they want, and that they're loving and that they want affection. One day I was holding a piece of chicken in my hands. It was like fried chicken. And I had had Conrad for probably a year or two by then. And I loved fried chicken. I thought it was really delicious. So I was really excited to eat it, and I was holding it in my hands, and I was actually feeling kind of the texture of it. And I just had this thought of, oh, the texture sort of reminds me of how Conrad's body feels. If you kind of squeeze his body, there's a give, but not the same way that for a mammal, it feels different. And I was like, this kind of reminds me of him. And then all of a sudden I was like, it's because it's a bird and he's a bird. And then I was really, really, really disturbed. And so then I didn't eat it, and then I stopped eating chickens. And that was kind of a step down the path to questioning everything. A couple years ago, I started a new nonprofit called Legal Impact for Chickens. We sue companies and executives that abuse and neglect animals on factory farms. Right now, we're working on a lawsuit against a company called Case Farms, which supplies chicken meat to KFC and other big companies. And in 2021, Case Farms was caught terribly mistreating newborn chicks. The company traps and crushes a large number of its birds in faulty machinery just because the company's not willing to put in the small amount of effort to keep all of its birds alive. And we believe that that's unlawful cruelty, so we're suing it. Companies don't follow laws unless the laws are enforced. Right now, a lot of factory farms and companies in the meat industry think that they're above the law, and that's because they've gotten away without being prosecuted for a lot of their crimes. The fact that companies lie about how animals are treated is a sign that the public cares and wants animals to be treated well. And so if that's what the public wants, then at a minimum, the animals should be treated better. Companies cannot be allowed to treat animals like they're worthless, because when companies treat animals that way, they end up using way more animals without even making more food. So for example, Case Farms hatches around, I think, 200,000 chicks a day at just a single hatchery, and it has multiple hatcheries. And then it lets a portion of those chicks die because it views them as so worthless economically that the company doesn't care about making sure each of those animals get turned into food. And so that cannot be acceptable. We need to be paying attention to how these companies treat animals, and they need to be thinking about whether they're treating every single individual animal humanely. And once they do that, they're gonna naturally wanna use fewer animals because they're not gonna be able to afford to just have a bunch of babies die the day that they're born, for example. Companies are motivated by making money and saving money, and they're unfortunately not sufficiently motivated by animal welfare. So, for example, in the case of Case Farms, the company saves money by hiring less workers than it really needs and by failing to fix faulty machinery. And then this results in animals being trapped, smashed, run over, and things like that, all of which would have been preventable if Case Farms would just value animal welfare as a good in of itself. At Legal Impact for Chickens, we believe that if we can't force somebody to care for moral reasons, we can force them to care for legal reasons. So companies are usually afraid of getting in trouble with the law if they know that somebody's watching them. And we want to show that somebody's watching and that they will be held accountable. And then in the end, it will affect them financially if they break the law. I focus on one individual animal and just try to think, if I can help one animal, then that would be really good. And I try to imagine how I would feel if I was maybe a baby chick in a hatchery or a slightly older but still very young animal in a slaughterhouse. I just try to focus on, can I relieve suffering for some animal? Yeah, that's what I try to focus on. That's what motivates me.